This is LeiLani Cauthen, your host, the CEO of the Learning Council News Media and Research Organization, and also a proud EduJedi Grandmaster, which has great meaning. It means you get a plastic lightsaber, and it's super awesome for everyone. Just so we all know what's going to happen today, this is a discussion on controlling digital learning, which is really about understanding what's going on inside all the digital curriculum that's out there and services and support for schools and districts in an endeavor to try to give you a new foundation to reimagine what you're really doing with all of your students. So I want to invite whoever else is attending. Lori Grasso, I see that you're on. If you want to be unmuted to join the conversation, that'd be great. We're waiting on Paul Henn to join us. But in the meantime, what I want to do is have Dr. Wendy Oliver and also Zach Simon. Okay, so Dr. Wendy Oliver is the Chief Learning Officer for Edison Learning, and Zach is the Assistant Director of Instruction and Advisement for Edison Learning. And it's really important that they share kind of what they're doing in the professional grade realm to sort of give this conversation a bit more of a foundation. Okay, Paul, hi, I see you're here. Great. Good to see you. Hope you're taking care of Minnesota in my absence. You know, I grew up there. All right, great. All right, so we're going to do something first to sort of frame the conversation, Paul, before we dig in and get to work, and invite our attendees to also sort of be part of this work because it's super important for the EduJedi. We're sort of leading the nation's conversation about really understanding what's going on inside all the digital things. So I want to start first with Dr. Wendy Oliver and Zach sharing out about Edison Learning, sort of frame the conversation about what's happening in the professional grade side. So go ahead, Wendy, take it away.
Thank you so much, LeiLani. We are excited to be part of the conversation and to get to have the opportunity to help define the EduJedi dictionary. This is exciting work, it's fun work, and much needed. To tell you a little bit about Edison Learning, we've been around for close to 3 decades. And we not only provide products by way of courses in grades 6 through 12 online that can be used in a blended classroom or asynchronously online, but we also provide instructional services, which you'll hear a lot about today as we talk about controlling. So we are excited to be here. We're going to show you some examples that I think will help as we talk through the definition so you can see some visuals of what some of these things look like, because as we know, most of us are visual learners, and that'll help you to see some of these terms and also help us to see some things that are missing. LeiLani, I know we've talked a lot about that. So yeah. Great to be here. Thank you so much. And we don't want to slow down the discussion, so ready to dig in.
Okay, great. Do you want to say anything else about these other items or come back to those?
I think, honestly, as I've reviewed these terms with Zach and we've worked on them, we're going to look at a lot of them in the discussion today. Okay. So let's just save it and let's look at them in context.
Okay, cool. All right. So then I want to also introduce Paul, who is the Director of Learning Services from New Ulm, and you're an EduJedi Award winner.
Yes.
Right? Yes. So you're awesome all around. So do you want to give us a little heads up on the state of things in your district first? Let's just have a little moment to kind of frame that out, Paul.
Yeah, actually, you know, it's really perfect timing for this conversation. We've been re-engaging now with our staff and teams, you know, after some good summer downtime from a hard year where we had to learn to do a lot kind of on the fly. And you know, we've been working now this summer on everything from infrastructure improvements to just really looking back at the last year and a half, really, and, you know, where is it that we had strengths within our digital curriculum, our digital delivery, how we worked with parents on our communication side, and are trying to put some new things together. And I think the last time we got together, we talked about what that looks like under a curriculum lens, you know, how we can start to find those balances between core foundational materials and adaptive materials, highly customizable materials, and really use that as leverage to provide a more personalized learning experience. And so we've been working hard this summer on kind of rebuilding our single sign-on platform that we're working through, so that it simplifies things for students and families, especially who have all of these wonderful tools and things that they use. And the hardest thing sometimes is to find a way into those things. Where is this at? Is this on the web? Is this on my computer? We've had all of those different kinds of challenges, and people have had different levels of access. We've worked really hard to improve access points for families who don't necessarily have access to those learning tools at home. So we've tried to really build some good core foundational practice in both our curriculum and infrastructure, and make improvements across the board, as well as just implementing all of these new and wild tools that are available for kids that really make learning dynamic.
So a lot of work is what I'm hearing,
Yes.
and probably a lot of complexity to all of that.
Yes.
So I also want to say we have a couple of our attendees that I would like Doug to make sure are able to join in the conversation at any time. Rebecca Skillern and also Jennifer McCartney, just in case you guys can pipe up along the way about these definitions and what we're going to work through today, and add any color behind them. I want to make sure that we can quickly add you into the conversation. So Paul, this is a conversation about controls, like inside software, the things that are the controls. So like what you just said about single sign-on, obviously major control the school needs to be able to facilitate, because if you can't get access, you're out of the game. And that's where a lot of the fall behind for the students are. So let me ask you first, before we dig into these definitions, have you guys experienced some of this kids not tracking on target with PACE?
Yes, and one of the biggest things, when we talk about controls, it's not just is what we implement or are what we are implementing, do they have those features like single sign-on, integrations to our LMSs? It's also our ability to be able to look at what are teachers and students actually using, and what benefit are we getting for those costs out of that, and making sure that we're building an environment where that cost benefit is really large. I'm going to give you one example, LeiLani, of Grammarly. Grammarly is a tool that we use that on any given day, out of our 700 seat licenses, we have over 600 used. And there are things that we have that cost similar to that, that we see on a daily use rate of about 15 to 20. And are we better off finding those resources that we can shift some of those very valuable funds to, that give us a more dynamic learning experience? So that control of being able to see a lot of those backside analytics has been really helpful in building in dynamic technology that is both useful and used in our practice.
Yeah, that's a really biggie, because it comes down to money, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one teacher's like, no, I have to have this. And you're like, but no, it's costing too much. Switch to this. And so it's a streamlining moment. It's not just a control moment. It has to do with money, so. Okay, cool. All right. So let's move into this next piece, which is what's going on in all these controls. So these are all in the EduJedi dictionary, the definitions, and our role today is to talk through them as a learning moment for everybody, because this recording will go out and then 10,000 people will watch it because they couldn't get on today. That happens a lot. And as well as, sort of add to it and edit it. Like if we realize as we're going through this, like, oh, wait, we're missing this, that's a big deal. So we need to add that in so that in the next iteration of the dictionary coming out at the end of the year, which is now going to be a full reference guide, we add that in. Okay, so let's start with these definitions, and then we'll move into the next one. So we have adaptive pacing is the first one in the dictionary. I'm not going to show the full dictionary right now, but I'll just sort of tie back to each one of them as we go through. But adaptive pacing is the first one. Those are software systems that allow students to be paced independently against learning paths. They normally will also intersect with a teacher, but it's like the system is distributing out the content, students interacting with it, teacher maybe has oversight in the analytics, but they're not doing the create a Google Doc, then pass it out to everyone, stick it in a learning management system or in Google Class, and then distribute, and then get back all the feedback, la, la, la. This is doing some of the heavy lifting kind of a thing, usually adaptive pacing is, unless I'm wrong, and this definition needs to be changed. And that's where I want you guys to weigh in. Is adaptive pacing something that's always automated, or is it something that maybe is semi-automated? What do we think?
For us in Edison Learning, I think it comes in many different ways. Adaptive pacing, it can come from the administrative side of the house where a teacher is making the adaptation, but we also see it within our software as well. I would be happy to show you an example of that adaptive pacing within our
let's
assignments.
do that. Let's do that. So Doug, give him the control window so he can show what he's talking about. I kind of had an inkling that this would be a definition we need to edit.
Yeah, I think it can come from many different areas. Can you see that screen now?
Yeah.
So this is an example of a lesson that a student would be going through. They would get these learning objects within our LMS, the essential instruction, the instructional video, the textbook, and then at this point, they would have access to the assignment. And at the district level, they would set that mastery level, and if the student didn't reach that mastery level, these additional learning objects would then appear and put them through that learning pathway. And that's one example of that adaptive pacing that we have. But I also think that teachers have that control as well. They could potentially create new pathways for students, give them resources or additional worksheets and assignments to students, as well as exempt them from certain parts of the lessons if the student understands something.
Yeah, I think that
already.
The important differentiation in this definition, if you go back, Paul, to what you said on how, from a district perspective, you're really personalizing the learning. The scalable way in which to personalize adaptive pacing is using algorithms. And I know, LeiLani, that was in a previous definition. So if you want your response to interventions to be algorithmically based, just like Zach's showing on the screen, where you set a mastery-based score initially and you say, okay, on all of our assignments, if students score an 80, then they move forward in the content. But if they don't, we want them to go through response to intervention and get some automatic reteaching. That is one way to do it at scale. And so you have that consistency. On the other hand, if your instructors are going to supplement content, maybe you have IEPs or your students are gifted, and they're getting some additional resources, or if your teachers are providing the resources, I think that's just a different model. And it just depends on if you want it to be driven by artificial intelligence or if you want your teachers to be doing it. And I think maybe, LeiLani, as I was looking at this definition, that's probably the piece that needs to be clarified. Is it something that you want your teachers doing by hand? And a lot of that, I think, is what made things so hard on teachers during the pandemic. Is that's a lot of work to do all of it by hand for each individual student. Whereas if the technology can help drive it, then it makes it easier, and then the teachers can focus on some other areas with kids.
Well, I think you said a couple things that are really important that I would like Paul or any of our attendees to weigh in on, and that is, right now we're dealing with, is all content raw from teachers? Okay, because then that means the also branching to alternative resource per personalization point is additional work, but you have the baseline of a lot of work. And the fact that, two, you're not scalable without algorithmic inference already branching the student to the alternative material based on score. So there's two levels there to the discussion. Paul?
Yeah, and that's where, we've started to differentiate that by, the adaptive content being that which is driven by, the artificial intelligences. We're collecting that data, and now we can be more targeted in some of our own reteach processes without having to create all of those pathways completely on our own. At the same time, we know we need some level of that highly customizable content that is teacher driven, that does create those pathways. And there's a certain percentage of resourcing that goes into our curriculum as a whole that really needs to fit that. So whether we're using an LMS and saying, every kid that scores 80% in this moves on to the next level of content, anybody below gets this assignment, that's all customized by the teacher. We do need that. But it goes back to, what does that balance look like inside of our curriculum? We don't want everything that we do to be all adaptive content, especially if we can't go back and use that data to, target those interventions or target those reteaching. But there's a certain level of that really helps us, work with small groups at one time while we know other kids are getting content that is meeting them at their level, and being able to kind of get that, I call it the tier 1.5, that extra half dose inside of the classroom without having to jump straight to some level of tier 2, tier 3 type of intervention. And that's where we've really looked at, how do we get a balance of foundational core content, adaptive content, and then those customizable pathways that we have based on that.
Yeah, this is really interesting because you've just described what the ideal scene is in a school, right? And the reason for that is that every human's not the same. All these students are not the same. So even if you build a highly adaptive it's got all the content in it, it's got all the branching in it. Even then, you're going to have some kid who's the oddball out, right? So you have to have that teacher piece, right? Okay. All right. So I'm going to ask our co-host, Doug, to make sure everybody else who's on the line is unmuted to be able to weigh in at any time, make a comment, raise your hand, kind of stuff. And also maybe have the document that is the background editing document up on your screen, Doug, because I can't pull it up on mine right now. So let's do that. So we're next talking about administrative personalization. Zach, did you want to show something on that too? So administrative personalization by definition is the ability to manage student access to programs and progress through the curriculum.
So yeah, absolutely. And I have this next page that I'll share with you will kind of show you those mastery settings that you can set at the district level. But then there's also that control setting where we have restriction settings. So you could potentially set this where if a student were to fail an assignment 2 times in a row, it would place a restriction on them. It would then give the teacher the opportunity, as Paul was pointing out, that you have kind of that hybrid of response to interventions going on. This would allow the teacher to then assign that response to intervention to the student that would be appropriate to their learning where they need it, which is a great feature. It really allows the teachers to then see that restriction in place, go in and look at the data, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, and then assign that intervention to the student, and then remove that restriction once that student is able to meet that mastery level. The way it would show up for the student or the teacher would be like this, and then the teacher would be able to see which standards that student is missing, which assignment they're having trouble with, where they're really needing some help, able to give that student the help, and then remove that restriction to allow the student to continue to work.
Okay, so I want to point out that I need Edison then to give me definitions of threshold and restriction. Because those aren't in this section. So from a professional grade viewpoint, we need those in here.
And then, LeiLani, I want to exercise my opportunity for think time. And I want to roll back for adaptive pacing. So I'm thinking about what Paul said in reflection to what I said.
Mhm.
So, in what you said, you're absolutely correct. The secret sauce, because it's our model too, is that there is that automated, adaptive, mastery based with the algorithms, right? And then there is what the teacher assigns as well. Maybe that needs a definition in and of itself, that model, because we all know that's what works for kids. And that technology is what is helping kids, and it's what's also giving our teachers the time to be able to customize and do those lessons that are specific to individual students. But what do we call that model? It's not.
Can I be bold and call it hybrid adaptive?
That makes sense to me. I don't know, Paul, what are you calling that when you do your professional development?
As far as what, Wendy?
The model that you described, which is the same model that we use, but we haven't named it. So I'm wondering if that needs to be added to the dictionary, right?
We haven't named it either. At least nothing formal. We go through those three different spheres of resourcing after we've gone through our standards and started to connect those resources, and then we say, if we have 90% foundational content and nothing in our adaptive content, and then the left is up to a staff member to customize, we know we're out of balance. So it's more about the three spheres that we work in than an overall process. We've really just kind of embedded it into our curricular review process now, so that we know that all of these different components need to be a part of that discussion. I guess formally we call it just a continuous review process with our curriculum, without any kind of fancy name or definition, knowing that we're going to work in those three defined spheres.
Okay, so then what I would like to say is we need to come up with the words that describe what software should be doing, hybrid between algorithmically inferred branching and pure customization. That itself is a control function that schools are, like Paul, what you're working towards with your continuous review is you don't want just static, teacher has no real branching control. And you also don't want 100% build it all yourself, you're on your own. So we do have to come up with that. I think it's hybrid something. Hybrid adaptive pacing. Anyway, so we need to come up with that and then make sure that that's in here. I've made a note of that.
Yeah, and I think any term that we can come up with that reflects balance, because we know that that's an important part of the balance these days. Especially here as we kind of move, and I still hesitate to use post-COVID, but where things are starting to come back to, in many places, a little bit more of a traditional look. How do we continue to maintain that balance and leverage those tools that we have, that we've used to really alleviate workflows on teachers, but also catch kids up on at a quicker pace without always having to be there right next to them to do that. Now we get that benefit of the artificial intelligence and that one-to-one or small group work that we do inside of the classroom.
Yeah, and I think you just used the perfect word, which is balanced adaptive. I think that's the definition that we have to define. What is balanced adaptive learning? Okay, so balanced adaptive pacing or systems. Okay, so
LeiLani,
I'll draft that. Okay, all right, so let's go to the next one that's on the list, and I'm gonna go to manual unless Doug has the document up later, but analytics. So we've got a big long definition in analytics in the dictionary. I don't really think there's anything we need to add to it unless you guys have comments, which is, it's essentially business intelligence interrelated around what students are doing.
And
any comments on that?
What students are doing, I think if there was anything that I would expand on in that, the what students are doing thing, is that in usage? Is that in learning? Is that in, what are those different components of what students are doing? Maybe that becomes a little bit more a part of specifically that definition. So usage, learning, content creation, personalization, those pieces.
Yeah, and in here it's calling, here's the thing, Paul, it's calling for things such as time spent on task,
Yep.
the accuracy of the response, number of responses, all those kinds of things. And the thing is that most of these systems aren't telling you that, is what we're all experiencing, right? So you have a student over here in some animated game like language or math software, and it's tracking maybe the linearity of the student through the modules, but it's not telling you how long were they in the module, that kind of thing. Because then as a teacher, you can go, wow, it took you a really long time to make fractions. Maybe something's missing with this child, right? Like I need to go back and maybe figure out what it, help them know exactly what a denominator is, because maybe they're, so you're right. There's some things that's missing. Oh, I'm showing the wrong screen, Doug is telling me. Okay. Stop sharing. Okay. Let's go back to the right screen. Okay, so noted, Paul. I noted that down. Assignment management tools. That's the next definition. So those are essentially applications that support assignment submission, tracking, and venues. Usually that's in an LMS, could be Google Class, right? But this is where a lot of teachers are getting overwhelmed. They distribute, and then they get pelted with all the stuff coming back, as well as parent questions and student questions and that kind of thing. Any comments we want to make about this definition, or should we move on to the next one? No? Okay. Going once, going twice. Okay, badging. Those are various systems that are supporting various badges, right? They're moments of achievement, portfolio stuff. And there's a lot of standards around badges right now. And there's also consumer level badging, which is sort of like stickering, giving kids a sticker. So it doesn't require that you have 6 levels of authority to actually grant a diploma or a grade. It's just passing stickers back and forth, and those are different in different systems. This is a mutating definition, in other words. Anything anybody wants to share about badging? Is it important to you? Paul, are you guys doing badging? I'm sorry, Paul. I was asking Paul, Are you guys doing any badging?
We're getting more into that discussion, but those badges are more focused on actual certifications. We're starting it with some CTE work and CTE programs where, we would define that badge as being attached to a specific certification. And now, I have that certification to go back out into the workforce and say, okay, I've earned this certification in, whether it be something automotive, heating and cooling. It's been especially big in our CTE work right now is, how do we, almost level up a badge to that certification style level.
Okay. Yeah, because then the question becomes, are you doing it only internally, or is it a mobile thing that can be pulled out into social sites, right? Because if you're certified in I don't know, wood shop or automotive or something, right? So you now want to show that later in life. You don't just want to be part of your school record, which later becomes something else. Hey, so Zach, do you want to show us what you guys have internally in your system? And then Doug, I need you to have up the actual document to go through the rest of the full definitions.
I
So
think the
just to add to that, I think what we do is a lot more like stickering, LeiLani, where our teachers are creating badges for students and giving them just to show that achievement. And I think, for me, I think what, we're looking into the credentialing side of things with the CTE courses as well, like Paul was speaking of, certainly to come. And I think Wendy could probably talk a little bit more about that. But one of the things that our teachers like to do for their students, and this is part of that, it's nice because we have our own curriculum, it's run, and our teachers are able to resource and supplement that curriculum as we go. And so we do have that going for us. I'll share my screen and show you some of the badges that our teachers will make for students.
Yeah.
But again, this is more like stickering.
Yeah, when Zach refers to our teachers, our teachers are used in a lot of different ways, and we work in multiple states. And so, a district may say, hey, we don't have a math teacher in this area or a science teacher in this area. Can we work with one of your teachers? And certainly we can do that. Sometimes we have students that enroll just for a particular course from a district, but we work as partners with districts. And so just for clarification, we are not, we're not like a K-12, for example, where we take enrollments from districts. We always work as a partner. And so sometimes it's to supplement programs, and sometimes it's just to supplement instructional services. So I don't think I clarified that at the beginning, so I wanted to come back and say that.
Or you're giving districts content, right?
Yes, or we work with the district just to provide content. We train that district's teachers. And with the so with the badging, if you're working with our teachers, then they'll use kind of the stickering concept to motivate students. And then really it's quite interesting, something that I'm really passionate about is with our CTE courses, we work with credentialing with third-party providers, and we actually award the credentialing on blockchain so that it stays with those learners forever, even once they leave, because those are career credentials that can stick with students. So that's really interesting, but that's more in the credentialing definition as opposed to the badging. So kind of fun there as we're starting to get into that territory. It's really neat. Families really like that. It's pretty interesting.
Okay, so I made notes here based on what you and Paul said that we need to define stickering, and we need to separate in badging a subcategory that is actually career credentialing, which may or may not have blockchain, but we need a definition in there because that's a service. If you've credentialed a student in something that they're going to want to keep with them for life, not like I just matriculated out of your school and now have no access except for a paper record, because that would be crazy. All right, so the next, are we good to move on to bookmarks or bookmarking? Doug, can you open the document and share from page 61? So bookmarking is something that people are really familiar with from Pinterest and from their, you want to enlarge that so we can read it because right now the type's really small. Yeah, or you can use your little slider at the bottom of your document, bottom right, Doug. Oh, that's much better. We can read bookmark now. We know Pinterest does a bookmarking function and your web browser's bookmark, but there's systems that also allow you to bookmark. So you can save favorites for when you're constructing lesson planning. Is there anything we need to do with this definition, anyone? Nope. Okay, moving on from bookmarks. We're bored with bookmarks now. So classroom suitability. So there's a lot here right now that I think too many school districts are overlooking is their legal compliances with FERPA, COPA, SIPA, HIPAA, right? In what they're allowing into the classroom. When you're going through, Paul, the vetting of apps in use, are you addressing this kind of stuff?
Yes, and what's becoming a real hot topic at the administrative level is, the cybersecurity side and the insurance side is very much driven by this. So being able to address these not only in a way that is legally allowable, but also insurable is becoming more and more difficult. We've been essentially told that, everything that we use needs to have some level of two-factor security to it. And, as an educational organization, we're looking at them like, okay, we have a hard time getting kindergartners, first grade, second graders through a single level of security. How can we, how can we make all of this work? So, in addition to some of the legal side of it now, there's that insurable cybersecurity to get them to, to insure us in case, we do suffer some sort of a cyber attack in the schools, which has gone on in some of our neighboring districts. There's all of those levels now, and we have to be able to talk about each of these legal compliance pieces and, how we're addressing those within our security frameworks as well. So that's where it's imperative to have a vetting process that looks at that really looks hard at that security side.
Yeah, and then puts them contractually in, like, thou shalt not sell my student data and don't
Right.
collect anything. Yeah, those are the things. Okay, good comment. Content levering, this is sort of just a definition that's telling you what you're doing when you're doing this thing that you do, which is, collecting and assigning things out. And that's what you're doing. It's nice to know that you're doing that. And then contextualization was a hot topic in another one of these EduJedi events where we talked about the lack of tagging structure. And contextualization is when you take some discrete little piece of content and you put something around it, like tags, like explanations, like instructions in an LMS, or you otherwise sequence it in a way that makes it uniquely yours. It doesn't rid you of your intellectual property, problems if you take a piece of content from somebody else's textbook. So this contextualization is a point of professional development for a lot of teachers right now, because they don't realize that they can't just take a discrete piece of content that maybe was developed somewhere else and plunk it into a system. In other words, disaggregate somebody else's intellectual property and use it themselves only. What are your comments on this, you guys? Paul, you go first.
One of the things I think that we start to, or that we're looking more at, one of our adoptions is our English language arts. And to me, platforms now that don't include, some of those attached licensed libraries full of books that we can use, that we can share, and more of the places we're looking, have those full libraries so that we can avoid that. We don't have to take something old that we really like to use, that kids are really engaged in, and try to plunk it in and then get the right permissions to do and use those different pieces. Now we're looking for those sources that have those included within those libraries, in addition to extra content that, again, we can use to engage and work with kids. And I think the more our partners can get out in front of that on the vendor side, the less problem we're going to have in that area. It's emerging yet. Not everybody has it, but using English language arts, for example, a lot of these platforms now have full libraries with great books, great reading, and it eliminates some of the problem of taking other digital components and putting it on your Google Classroom and kind of hoping that nobody other than your kids see it.
Hopefully nobody don't. Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. Good comment. Moving on to the next one. Doug, I lost your screen. Oh, somebody wants to share. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
LeiLani, I just want to say not only on the classroom suitability, but also on the contextualizing, I would just say, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but however, as a chief learning officer in a few different for-profit companies, in my 20 years of history in online learning, I would say, as you look at partners and providers, don't assume if they have instructional services don't assume that those teachers, even though it's professional grade content, don't assume that they understand how to work with HIPAA and FERPA or third-party content. I would have those conversations, and I say this because I am particularly obsessed with student data. I would make sure I had those conversations with those companies before I used them for services, and discuss how their teachers handle third-party data and how the company does as well. I mean, that's something that we've really focused on at Edison Learning and spent a lot of professional development on. But I certainly think that's an area of due diligence that all education systems need to do. Because, you know, one thing that teachers, I don't care who they work for, they need a good understanding that free means that data is the currency. And I would just caution you on that and say that's something that we focus on. And on contextualizing, Zach and I had a really good discussion on what that could mean. And so I know, Zach, we talked about what all could be included on there and maybe some clarification around that. I don't know, Zach, if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, I think contextualization comes from all over the place, right? Particularly with our teachers, you know, creating content and pulling content and then explaining it to students. So we see that with our instructional services through feedback, through the messages that they're sending students when they're having problems with content. You know, we don't necessarily see it all the time with giving them a grade or making a module out of it, but we see it all the time. Our teachers are obviously, you know, they work within our system. They have the content that we have on our professional grade side or the commercial grade side, but they're also adding their own videos and they're creating their own you know, explanations of these things for students to add to the content and resource students.
Okay, good. And then did you want to share screen as well on the next definition?
Was that for contextualizing or for feeds? Which one was that for?
I think either one.
Yeah,
Doug,
I would love
Okay.
to show you how our teachers can interact with students through feedback and
yeah, because I'm making notes to change this definition by way of added feedback, instructions. Yeah, go ahead.
let me just get to that page. WebEx is in the way.
Of course it is.
There we go.
Okay.
This is, you know, one great way where, you know, the students are interacting with their assignments and then the teacher gets to respond to that student and they can add feedback. You know, our teachers are, you know, trained to provide growth mindset feedback. They know how to interact with students and are constantly taking, you know, in that qualitative and quantitative data to adjust their feedback to students, to contextualize this to fit that student and personalize it for them. So in this, you know, in this context, a lot of times, and this is just a demo student, I created this this student answer. A lot of times students are reaching out and saying, I need some help with this. There's not a whole lot of information, but as a teacher, there's a lot of data points that they can use. They can look back to see if this is a reoccurring theme, or maybe it's something in the curriculum that is lacking, and they can contextualize it. They can add something. They can give a student a resource. They can create a video for the student. They can add that onto their. They can attach that as a file to their feedback, and then send that as a message to the student, where the student can then interact back with the teacher. All kinds of ways that, you know, are
To contextualize. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. Good. So I made notes of that's what we need to change in that particular definition.
Awesome.
Okay. So any other comments on that, or we move on to the next one? Let me see how many more we have to do. Quite a few. We gotta get busy here. Okay. So we also have, is encryption the next one? Doug, can you put the document back up? Okay. So credentialing, I'm not going to get into credentialing right now because I think we've already discussed this with stickering and badging. So dashboard, I don't think we need to really discuss that. We all know what a dashboard is. Data collection infrastructure. Sometimes there are data collection infrastructures that sort of are what we call middleware. They sit between like your LMS and all of your other disparate apps to drag data out of them through open APIs and aggregate it into a dashboard. Not very many districts are doing this yet, but I'm very aware as Learning Council, they're out there because I've talked to some of those companies about what they do. Any comments we want to make on this? Paul, have you heard of those kinds of things?
Yeah, we use a data warehouse that actually I'm our data and analytics person in our district too. So I'm always in our data warehouse, and one of the things they allow me to do is build some different customizations, whether they're for placements again that fit an MTSS system, whether it's more of just being able to crosswalk our college readiness and state level assessments. I can see behavior, attendance, anything that we can pull from our student information system runs back through into our data warehouse, and we can look at everything from correlations between behavior incidents and achievement, attendance and achievement. We can triangulate and build different customizations for that. And we do use it to help fill how we do have our district-wide dashboard up on our website to use that information. So we're trying. I don't use a company that's kind of all-encompassing, because I guess my preference is to work in the raw data and build those customizations myself, versus having just what any given group would give me, and that's what my current data warehouse provider does for me.
Well, that's because you're super awesome then, Paul. Other people are going to be like, can you sell me something to do this? But you're awesome doing it yourself. Okay, so moving on to dynamic curation. This is something that is web crawling and pulling data in some instances, or it is, like it says here, some of these systems are close to being able to deliver adaptable digital libraries. Essentially, they're like big repositories or data warehouses, Paul, where you do a search and it auto recommends. So it's curating for you. It's not necessarily using a global internet AI. That's not in the market yet. So I don't want to go too deep into this one, because this was written by earlier EduJedi. Kind of move on to the next one. Can you scroll down, Doug? I think the next definition is encryption. I spent 4 years in the brain surgery level of software encryption market. I don't think we need to say anything else about that, but I do believe that when more of our audience listens in on this, I will say that encryption's coming soon, and you need to know how to handle it in this market, particularly for email. Now that students have so much remote that they're doing, and who knows, you're going to be in or out of school, next wave of COVID, who knows what's going to happen. Encrypted email will be coming soon, and so you're going to see that start to take off in the market. Favoring or liking, this is a concept. It's commonplace in a lot of social media and commercial systems. It's not necessarily built into a lot of the app applications, but it's something that's in expectations of students. They don't want to write a full comment. They just want to hit the thumbs up, right? Like, got it, teacher, Any thoughts we want to say about this? Nope. Paul, you're just smiling because that's just your thumbs up. Right,
I think
now.
it's such a relevant thing. The kids are going to recognize it, and it's fun. Again, what you take out of that as far as that feedback loop goes is, kind of up to anybody that's using it, but certainly something that kids are going to recognize.
Yeah. Any comment from you guys, Wendy? Zach?
We have the capability in the platform, and Zach can show it. I was tickled because, if Zach, you want to pull it up, I have a 9-year-old, and at the end of Accelerated Reader, every time she reads a book, she gets to rate it, right? She loves the power. So, that's what I was thinking of.
We certainly have the ability, particularly with our forum posts. If a teacher makes a forum post, students can rate them, and that gives feedback back to the teacher as well. Okay, they like this forum post, but then they can also rate the responses of their peers. You can see that. And kids love to do it. Students love it.
Okay, cool. Cool. Can you also speak to number 71 feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, feedback is really our bread and butter. And in asynchronous education with our learning management system, it's really where our teachers get to intervene when they see, a student is doing well, when a student is missing the mark. They really get to put their voice into their feedback. It's really where our teachers get to interject, get to resource students, get them back on track, get to build a relationship with them as well. We use it extensively. We really have two different types of feedback that we leverage with assignments. One is question feedback, so that is tagged to individual questions. Okay. And the other is assessment feedback, which can be conceptual in nature or even like a routine or a scheduled check-in that you might have with a student. So for instance, every Unit 1 exam, a teacher's going to send this questionnaire to a student or ask this question: how are you doing? What are your goals? Are you meeting your goals? You can have regular check-ins. Now that might not necessarily be feedback in and of itself, but you're soliciting that feedback from the student so that you can make adjustments as the instructor.
Okay.
So I think feedback is really a big definition here in our world.
Okay. All right. So thank you, Zach. Okay, so we got to speed up because, we can go longer if we want to, but I would prefer that we kind of try to stay on time for Paul's sake. Paul, I know you have a life. You have a whole life.
I have a team next door to me working, expecting me back at 2, so.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to skip past filtering. I think we know what that is. Grouping number 73. This is an up-and-comer in terms of auto cohorting, auto calendaring of groups in PACE classes. I don't want to get into that too much right now. We've spoken a little bit about interoperability. I think we can pass that. I want to go past legalese, metrics, and get to selective release. I know, Wendy and Zach, you have a comment on selective release, and I think this is an important one right now for a lot of school districts who have to put students on weird schedules. So they need this control. So why don't can you show me selective release? And then Paul, if you want to comment while they bring the screen up, that'd be great.
I'll have them go ahead.
Okay. All right, good. Go ahead, Zach. I think you guys have selective release as a functional control, which not very many people are familiar with this definition. So it'd be good if you showed it. I think Doug passed you share screen.
I'm not sure if I have anything to really, I can show you selective release, how it would be executed. So one of the things that we can do is we can pass students through or block them, right? And so I think that might be, it's not really an algorithmic mechanism.
Okay.
Now what we can do though is we can time release, right? Where we can set a time for something to be released.
Well, we need to add that definition in here. What is a timed release?
That's
okay.
81, I believe, LeiLani. Selective release
there it
is what I would consider conditional releases. So that's where, kind of if-then statements. If the student can't move forward unless he or she completes or makes a certain score. So that's that mastery base that we showed at the beginning.
Yeah, and this is no small conversation. I'm sure, Paul, you've also seen this. There's a lot of systems out there. I mean, I was asked to review one for one of the states recently that basically when the student enters, all the content is in the first pocket, including the teacher background materials. So if you don't have the separation between what you can see versus what everyone else can see, or it's all glommed together, you can get confusion. and how the course is supposed to be being run. Okay, so I won't go any more into that, but any comments from you guys on that?
Yeah, I was going to say, unfortunately, I think Zach's pulling it up. If you don't set selective or conditional releases or blocking, what students do, and I think a lot of people, you always have to find this out the hard way when you first get into blended or online learning. What students do is they skip all the content and they want to go in and just do the quizzes or the tests so they can hurry and finish their course. And then of course, they fail everything, and you have to back them back up and start them over again. It happens every time. Always. It doesn't matter who the kid is. And then you have to start them over, and then you figure out, if it's your first time doing online learning, oh, okay, I'm going to have to set this so that they have to make X or above on the quiz before they can move forward. And that is selective or conditional releases or blocking. That was one of my first lessons learned 20 or so years ago in online learning. They're sneaky little stinkers, and they just want to get through with their work and be done.
Oh, yeah, they are. Okay. All right, good. So I think we covered that then. And then, Doug, if you can pull the document back up before we end off here, and I'll show my final screen about the next activity. I think we have timed rollout, timed release. We just talked about those. A trigger would sort of go in with that. Then we've got user diagnostics, which Paul already talked about, and I think that's well defined here. Username, password schemas. I think people don't pay enough attention to that. And then the last one is walled garden. Okay, so anything we want to say about username, password schemas, because here's the thing. Students can sometimes pick the most scary, silly things like 1, 2, 3, 4. Even adults do this stuff. Any thoughts on this, Paul?
Yeah, there's such a wide range. We want to appropriately integrate technology into our learners' classrooms as much as we can, as much as is appropriate for their cognitive levels. And that argument when you get with your younger learners is it needs to be simple. Well, how can we make it secure yet make it simple? And I think these tie back into some of the other things that are in your document, with those single sign-ons, with those platforms and portals that we can build that are more secure, but really allow ease of use for our families, for our kids. I think the ability is there to be both secure and simple. It's just finding and adopting those solutions inside of your district.
Okay, awesome. Good comment. Okay, well, with that said, the only other definition in this section was a walled garden. I think we all know what that is. I don't think we need to adjust that definition. So I think we did a lot of work here. And Paul, I did put in that this section needs a definition of two-factor. From something that you mentioned. So I think we did good work here today, and a lot of people will appreciate it. So I want to share as the final point what's going to happen this Friday. So come back to us. Let me see if I'm sharing the right application. Stop sharing. Share the right one. Here it is. Screen 2. Activity 6 is the customization of Digital Learning Universe. And I must tell everyone I love these photos of outer space. They're super awesome for EduJedi. And I want to thank you, Paul, for doing this with us today. It was really illuminating. You gave us a lot of help and a lot of good comments. Really good work for the EduJedi. And thank you, Wendy and Zach, so much for all your comments and sharing. This will all go to edit now, and then get out to the whole national audience of 310,000 people. These are being viewed right away after they come out by over 10,000 every time. I think the first one had 26,000. So we're doing good work, and it will affect the upcoming EduJedi dictionary. And thanks again, and goodbye for now, everyone. Bye, Paul.
Thank you.
Take care of Minnesota for me.
I will.
Okay. Okay. All right. Bye, Wendy. Bye, Zach.